I was born and raised in Kansas, and anyone who knows anything about Kansas knows that the state is famous for wheat, sunflowers, and the Wizard of Oz. I used to wish that I could grow up and be just like Dorothy, but instead, I became a disaster researcher. My work has taken me to at-risk and disaster-affected communities across the United States and around the world. I study children in disasters, so much of my time in these places has been spent interviewing and observing young people. Today, I would like to tell you some about what I have learned from children along the U.S. Gulf Coast. But unlike the Wizard of Oz, this is no fairy tale. To begin, I would like to introduce a boy I will call Oliver. When Oliver was only 6 years old, his family's home in Lower Louisiana was devastated by Hurricane Katrina and Rita in 2005. The family moved 3 times before they settled in a modest house on the outskirts of New Orleans in 2008. Soon after they unpacked their belongings, they had to leave when Hurricane Gustav hit. 2 years later, in 2010, Oliver's life was disrupted yet again by the BP oil spill. Then, to add insult to true injury, he and his family were forced to leave in advance of Hurricane Isaac in 2012. 5 successive shocks in a 7-year period. When I first interviewed Oliver, he told me, what I thought was a childhood was just me really preparing myself for the next natural disaster to come. I refer to children like Oliver who have experienced 3 or more major community-level disasters before their 18th birthday as exposure outliers. They are statistical outliers because their multiple experiences with disaster are not normative yet. But given this ever more turbulent and unequal world that we now live in, these children have important lessons to teach us about the cumulative effect of collective trauma events. One of the many things that I learned from the exposure outliers is that while we as researchers can count the number of disasters that they have been through, the trauma that they experience is more multiplicative than additive. Think about what we know about the impact of concussions on the human brain. It is a well-established medical finding that a second concussion does far more damage to the victim than the first one did, never mind a third. I think that cumulative exposure to major disasters may be something like that. I also learned that of all the disasters that the exposure outlier children experience, Katrina was by far the most damaging. It was simply on another plane in terms of the destruction that it caused. And for many of the children, it set them and their families on a cascading cycle of loss and disruption. This left children wondering what their lives would have been like without all of these disasters. One of the girls I interviewed, I'll call her Samantha, told me about that. She was supposed to start ballet classes on Monday, August 29th, 2005, the day that Hurricane Katrina made landfall. Samantha said to me, 11 years later and 4 disasters later in her young life, so I could have been a dancer or something, but that opportunity is gone. Social scientists have long recognized that disasters give us a window into the social order. They allow us to see many things, including what we value and who we value, and sometimes what and who we don't value in society. The exposure outlier children, almost all of whom were African American and from low-income or working-class backgrounds, offered numerous insights into vulnerability and the possibility for lessening human suffering. For Oliver and Samantha, multiple disasters had taken away much of their childhoods, yet both were able to establish a sense of routine and stability. Oliver found his anchor through joining the Young Marines, a youth leadership and service program. He graduated high school and now works full-time in New Orleans. Samantha, who experienced several displacements, found routine through throwing herself into her studies. She went on to become her high school valedictorian and to earn a college degree in psychology. So children are not just helpless victims. They can and do recover. But disasters also deepen already existing inequalities, and we are now living in an era where these events are more frequent and extreme. What this means is that the exposure outlier children of the Gulf Coast are likely harbingers of what is to come. And soon enough, the experiences of the outliers will move to the center. It is therefore crucial that we listen carefully to the children and the families who are already the true experts on the scene. At the Natural Hazard Center here at the University of Colorado Boulder, we bring together researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to help move knowledge into action to reduce the harm and suffering caused by disasters. We do this work with an increasing sense of urgency, as well as with a vision for a just and equitable world, where the lessons from disaster survivors like Oliver and Samantha help guide our way. It is not too late to act on these lessons, but there is also no time to waste. Thank you.